A couple of weeks ago, I was preaching and I got these comments about my stole. And I promised that I would tell the story of the stoles. And so here it is. The story of my stoles is that almost all of them are gifts. I think only 2 of them are ones that I actually purchased for some purpose, some occasion. Other than that, they have all been gifts to me. For example, this set over here was a gift from my parents when I was ordained in 2004 in my home church up in Northern California. This one was designed by my sister and my mother. This one was a gift in honor of my grandparents, none of whom lived to see me be ordained. And so I wear it in honor and memory of them. This one is a big favorite of our congregation because we have lots of folks who are interested in textiles. These were gifts from all of you. First Congregational Church gave these to me in 2018 on my 5-year anniversary of service to the church. And this was an ordination gift. This was a graduation gift from Doug Adams. Many of you will remember Doug. He was a scholar of Christian worship at Pacific School of Religion. And back in the day, he visited us and taught here at First Congregational Church. Over here, we have some they're all special. But this one's very special. This was a gift from my partner, Mark. It was his mother's stole for performing weddings. She passed away 14 years before Mark and I met. And so he gave this to me. Romance lives. And of course, it's a beautiful thing to feel that I stand in the tradition of his family and that his mother, who was a bit of a feminist icon, could maybe live on a bit in my ministry. We also have this was given to me because I helped with a community organizing project. This one over here, this was designed after the pattern of the windows at First Congregational Church of Palo Alto, and a gift by my aunt. This one was given to me by an old boyfriend, so I don't actually wear it all that often. And this one is the stole that you were all asking about. So, Paisha, I'm going to carry that stole up into the pulpit so everyone can get a closer look. So this stole was made by the Reverend Dr. Sandy Johnson, and I worked closely with her when I was in Minnesota on conference staff. She was a local church minister and chair of our committee on ministry, and she retired in that time. And her retirement project, you can find this online, is called Woman of the Cloth. And what she does is she uses her passion for quilting and for fabric arts to make stoles. She made the one that I have on. She made this one. And the funny thing was, I was hanging out in her Woman of the Cloth booth at the national meeting of the UCC at Synod, and I was trying to pick one because I was going to get to buy one, so I had to pick the one that I liked. And I picked this one up and I said, what is the story behind this one? Because she always chooses fabrics that have a particular meaning, not only liturgical, but some sort of nuance. You can tell she was a preacher before she was a stole maker. And she got embarrassed, which is not typical for her. She said, oh, that one. That's one of the first ones I made, and it's kind of a mistake. And she said, look how the fabric doesn't really match up on the 2 different sides. Look how it's 2 different fabrics coming together. And I said, Sandy, that's what I like about it. And now I love it even more because I know that you think it was a mistake and I think it is beautiful. So of course we, had like one of those moments between friends where you kind of like, oh, and hug and all of that. But she gave me the stole. And so it is actually a gift. And I got to wear it, and Tom Emmanuel got to wear it for Good Friday service, which is coming up. And I get to share it with all of you. And it brings up this interesting question. I'm going to set this aside. Brings up this interesting question about the stories that are part of our lives and the stories that we tell to ourselves. She saw the stole and saw this mistake of 2 things stitched together in error. And that now that she was more sophisticated in her stole-making craft, that she would have done it in a more refined way. And I saw this Beautiful mistake. I saw something, I didn't know what she pictured. All I saw was the end result, which is gorgeous. And we are doing this all the time. We are stitching and restitching the stories of our lives. We are reviewing. We're singing the refrain over again as we seek to find the wisdom in our lives. We restitch our stories. And the ones that we are afraid to retell can be the ones that give us the greatest liberation, as painful as it is to be honest. And the ones that are hardest to restitch are usually the ones in which we are rediscovering our purpose. So coming to grips with our purpose is one of the things we do when we retell the stories of our lives to ourselves, when we restitch the stories of who we have been and who we are becoming. So right now I'm reading this book called Lost in Thought, The Hidden Pleasures of an Intellectual Life by Zena Hitz. And Dr. Hitz is a St. John's Great Books scholar who converted as an adult from atheism to Catholicism. And she's really intrigued with the idea of learning and studying as one of our life purposes. And she says this: how ought we describe this human need, the appetite for learning and understanding in a way that illuminates its typical forms and deviations? I follow a tradition originating with Plato and Aristotle that distinguishes types of desire by the final end. We do many things instrumentally for the sake of something else. Eat breakfast to calm hunger pains, exercise to stay healthy, work for money, have children to placate a spouse or fit in with the Joneses. Other things we do for their own sake: play cards or go for hikes, read or build model airplanes. Some things are evidently both instrumental and for their own sake. We have children for their own sake. We work for money, but sometimes we also love our work activities. We fish to eat, but also for the sport of it. Our actions and our activities are affected by our goal in pursuing them. Thus, each action or activity has an end goal that gives it certain character. And the structuring effect of some goals over others suggests that we have a basic orientation determined by our ultimate end. Such a goal is our highest good, whether we have chosen it as such or it has grown higgledy-piggledy out of personal or social pressures. And she ends with this sentence: if we do not have that, if we do not have a single basic orientation, it is very difficult to understand common stories about how our lives change. So let me end that quote with a word of explanation. Orientation is a little bit of that's a weighty word. She is not speaking about affection or gender identity or about who we fall in love with. She's talking about a direction that we, in our lives, have this ultimate vision of where we want to end up. And this goal, she says, structures our choices all along the path. Now, isn't that fascinating when we think about our purpose? And when we think about the ways we respond to the challenges of our lives, those challenges come in. Maybe they cause us to shift our ultimate goal. Maybe they cause us to reorient in our understanding about who we are and where we're going. You know, in today's great American novel, Owen Meany is the hero of the book by John Irving, A Prayer for Owen Meany. And this book is distinguished because it talks about this exact issue. The character of Owen Meany, his life story is described by the narrator, the best friend. The best friend tells the life story of Owen Meany, and the great mystery of Owen Meany's life is that as a very small boy, he has a vision of his own death. He has a vision of how he will go. Now, would you want that? That's a good question for after church. Call up a friend or sit down over lunch. Would you really want to know? For Owen, it is both a blessing and a burden. It's a blessing because he feels this deep sense of spiritual purpose. God has made him a certain way. God has given him certain gifts, certain challenges, so that he will be able to fulfill that ultimate goal. But along the way, he also makes choices to fulfill that ultimate path. And as the narrator famously says, I'm a Christian because of Owen Meany. The narrator finds faith in watching Owen walk toward that ultimate destination. And of course, the novel starts with a very painful twist of fate. Owen Meany hits a baseball, and it kills the mother of the narrator and sets forth this long passage toward a redemptive final act of his own. And so all along the way, the loss of that beautiful and radiant mother informs the goal, informs the choices. He knows where he is going. He is going to bring life out of his own death. But how he gets there, it's a story he has to keep stitching and restitching and trying to figure out along the way. Now, this is a powerful story about purpose. And some of us are blessed with a really clear sense of our purpose, and some of us are not. That's just reality. I actually take a little issue with her idea that there is one single basic orientation. I much prefer the idea that we have an orientation that is impacted by life's changes and choices. And that takes me into our scripture from the book of John today, a very famous scripture with famous characters. See, Jesus is visiting with a family that he knows very well. He is visiting 3 siblings, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Mary and Martha are known for their story of, Martha, Martha, why are you busy doing all the household things when Mary is sitting here listening to Jesus? She does the thing. This is the better way. It's that Mary and Martha here in the book of John. And Lazarus, famously, is raised from the dead by Jesus. So Jesus is visiting these 3 siblings with the disciples, and Mary does this outlandish and extravagant thing. She takes a pound of costly perfume and cleans his feet. Now, we must remember in these pre-modern times, feet were not awesome. People wore sandals. It was dry and dirty. There was not a lot of water. Hygiene was And so you always washed your own feet when you arrived at someone's home. It was respectful, and frankly, it was probably essential sanitation. So washing someone else's feet, as Jesus does with the disciples, or as Mary does with him here, is a profound act of servanthood. Actual servants were protected from having to wash people's feet because it was considered such a dirty and potentially unsanitary task. And of course, feet always have a bit of a sensuous implication in the scriptures, not real prominent in this moment, but there are definitely parts of the Bible where feet are stand-ins for other more sensitive organs of the body. So when Mary chooses to wash Jesus' feet, she's doing something even the servants wouldn't have been asked to do. Washing someone else's filthy feet is so personal, so potentially toxic. It's transgressive. And Mary cleans his feet with her own hair, anointing his feet with this costly perfume, which cost the equivalent of 300 days of labor, virtually a year's salary. It's more than Chanel No. 5. It is liquid gold. And yet we know Mary from the scriptures already. We know that she is passionate in her devotion. She knows her basic orientation. She knows her purpose. Her final end, her basic orientation, her Aristotelian destination is faith. It's devotion. And it is faith and devotion with this wholehearted spirit of abundance. It is this extravagant display of devotion that really kind of embarrasses everybody. It's a bit much. It's a bit much. And it reveals Judas. In her display of abundance, the scarcity of his faith is revealed. Now, at First Church, we're very lucky. We have a very long history of prudent, wise, and unimpeachably ethical treasurers. But Jesus was not so lucky. His treasurer was Judas. And his treasurer was pilfering from the shared financial resources of the disciples. He was embezzling. And so you see this pilfering financial dude, and he watches this abundant outlay of resource, this abundant display of faith. And he finds the perfect argument. He says, the money could have been spent on the poor. But the book of John, which is always eager to fill in any gaps, the book of John tells us right there that he's not using money appropriately. He's pocketing the disciples' funds for himself, and he is exposed in his basic orientation. Under the cover of altruism and concern for those without, his basic orientation is revealed to us along the road toward his betrayal on Maundy, Thursday. And he invokes fearful ideas of scarcity in order to distract from his basic orientation toward the enriching of his own pockets. Well, sure, the abundance of Mary's faith makes him uncomfortable. Who knows? Maybe everyone was a little bit uncomfortable for her to take her hair down and display it there in front of everyone, apply it to the feet of a man right in front of everyone before dinner. It is unconventional. It is sensuous. And it is utterly purposeful. It's purposeful because she's not only showing her hair to the world, she's not only showing her face to the world, she's showing her faith. She's showing she knows who she is and what she cares about. She has her end in mind as clearly as our friend Owen Meany. She knows there is an end in mind, utter faith, utter devotion, and all the choices along the way that she makes are going to display that faith. Like a lamp on a lampstand, her faith is going to blaze out, and it's going to show the truth of everyone around her. And it's going to make them question their purposes. It's going to make them restitch their stories and tell the truth of themselves to themselves. And who knows? Maybe they'll restitch their stories and they'll see the beauty in their mistakes. I know that is one of the ways we find faith. But she's 100% transparent. She doesn't have to say anything more. Everyone can see it. Her life is all about that devotion to faith. Jesus is the teacher of her heart. She adores him, and she is going to show her love of God through this sensuous act of servanthood, cleaning the human feet of her living God. Now, most of us go through transitions in life where our basic orientation shifts. where our goal shifts, our sense of purpose. Maybe family usurps career. Maybe career usurps family. Maybe charitable acts come in and usurp the significance of one's career at the time of retirement. I see that happen. People make those basic shifts in orientation and purpose. And one of the changes that affects us most is loss. Owen Meany and his best friend losing the mother. Mary and Martha losing Lazarus. It explains the power of her faith. She had lost her brother, and Jesus restitched the story. And out of death came life, and out of loss came hope, and out of grief came wisdom. In the final analysis, friends, we don't know how our lives will end. Perhaps that's for the best. We're not Owen Meany. We are not Jesus. We don't get to know in advance. But we do get to discern deep in our hearts what our basic orientation shall be. With God's guidance, I recommend. And all along the way, we can make choices that support our central purpose. But we should expect that loss and the profound presence, which is overwhelming absence, may cause us to restitch our story. I think it's most important to say, we're not meant to restitch our story with a fear of scarcity looming over our heads. We are not meant to restitch our story with some kind of toxic positivity that says everything's going to be fine. It's going to take effort. And that is the promise of abundance. Not that you will be exempted from the effort of dealing with loss or grief, but that you will be carried with the abundance of God's love as you do that work. There are not a lot of promises in life. But I think the choice to orient yourselves within the abundant love of God may fulfill itself not only in a final destination, which is glorious, but in a path which is truly liberating. So friends, when challenges come, when we have to stitch together a new story, do so knowing that you will never be short of all that you need, the abundance of God's love. May it be so.